My brother got me kicked out of the house so he could use my room as a game room, and now, years later, after discovering that I bought my own house, my parents are demanding that I give it to him. When I was younger, I lived with my mom, my stepdad, and my younger half-brother. My brother was always their favorite because my mom hated seeing me as I reminded her of my dad, whom she had cheated on, and for some reason she blamed me for it. I was often ignored and left out. For years, I tried to ignore this and get by, but the situation became unbearable when I was about 14 years old. My brother was spoiled and always got what he wanted. He was really into video games, and over time, he started complaining that the house didn't have enough space for him to have his own game room, something he had seen somewhere and now wanted. My parents then started hinting that I should leave the house so my brother could use my room as his game room. At first, I thought they were joking since they often told me to leave the house and that my presence there was useless. But then I realized they were serious. They began pressuring me to leave, saying that I was practically an adult and it was time to move on. I told them that I wasn't even old enough to have a job yet, had nowhere to go, and was far from being an adult. But as time passed, they decided it was time for me to go. And one day I came home from school to find all my belongings thrown on the sidewalk. It was incredibly tough. I had to go from shelter to shelter until an angel appeared and adopted me. She was a police officer who lived near the shelter where I stayed the most, and we got to know each other. A few months later, she took me to live with her and eventually adopted me. Honestly, if it weren't for her, I don't know how I would have managed to move forward. Years went by and I did my best to move on. I worked hard, studied, and saved enough money to buy my own house with my own business. I couldn't have done it without my adoptive mother for sure, as she financed my education and helped me pay to start my business. Now that things were going well for me, I also bought a house for her so she could get out of renting. However, when my biological family found out that I had bought a house, and a house for my adoptive mother, apparently because the guy who sold me the house was a friend of my family, everything got worse again. It started with a message from my stepfather, dry and direct, as if he had never thrown me out on the street. "We heard about your new house. It was about time you did something for the family that raised you." That made me immediately nauseous. Family that raised me? The same one that expelled me at 14 so the little prince could have space to play gamer? The same one that never gave me a hug, everything will be okay, a plate of hot food when I went to sleep crying? The same one that left me at the mercy of the street without even wondering if I would survive? The next day, my mother called me. The last time I heard her voice was in a scream telling me to get off the sidewalk because I was disrupting the facade of the house. I answered on impulse, maybe wanting to understand how far they would go with this shamelessness. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't ask if I was happy, if I was healthy. No, she went straight to the point. "Your brother is getting married and needs a place to start his life. You don't need 2 houses." I felt such deep anger that my hand started to shake. I took a deep breath and answered as calmly as I could. "You want me to hand over the house I fought for years to conquer to someone who never had to fight for anything in life? Just because he's getting married?" And she, without hesitation, said, "He's your brother. Family helps family." I almost laughed. Family helps family. I slept on park benches, hungry and afraid. Family helps family. Where were they when I needed new shoes to go to school? Where were they when I was beaten in one of the shelters and no one showed up to visit me in the hospital? I hung up without saying anything else. I thought I would have peace after that, but I underestimated their capacity to cross all limits. Days later, messages from unknown numbers started. One of them said, "You're going to regret turning your back on your family." Another, "You have a blood debt to us." My adoptive mother even received an anonymous message saying she was interfering too much in a family that wasn't hers. That really got to me. I went to the police station to file a report. I already had contacts. I already knew what to do. I was different from the fragile boy they had expelled years ago. And more, I had a name, I had a clean record, I had proof. But it didn't stop there. What really made me explode was when my former schoolmate, now a neighbor of my biological parents, told me that my mother was going around telling everyone in the neighborhood that I was ungrateful, that the house I had bought was an inheritance from my father, the same father she cheated on and hated, and that I had renounced my blood for money. That was the last straw. If war was what they wanted, war is what they would get. That night I didn't sleep. I tossed and turned in bed, mulling over every word, every unresolved memory, every scar they had left on me. It was as if, after years of rebuilding myself, they had torn a piece of my soul and spat on it with contempt. I wasn't going to let it slide. For the first time, I decided to face it head-on. Not for me, but for that 14-year-old version of myself, who cried hugging his own clothes thrown on the sidewalk while his brother got a PS5 with the money that should have been for my school uniform. The next morning, I went to the neighborhood where I grew up, not because I felt nostalgic, but because I wanted to look them in the face and show them what they had lost. I parked my new car in front of the old peeling house that I was once forced to call home. It was still the same colorless place, but now with more cracks, more trash in front, and an even more decadent air. I rang the doorbell firmly, knowing that hell was about to begin. The one who opened the door was my brother, now in his early 20s with a beer belly that didn't match his age, and the same spoiled look as always. When he saw me, his eyes widened and he tried to force a cynical smile. "Hey, bro, did you come to hand over the keys?" I laughed. In his face. A dry laugh, one of those that burns in your throat from so much accumulated contempt. "No, I came to tell you that if you or our parents contact me again, I'll take you all to court for moral harassment, slander, and attempted extortion. And I have proof. Oh, and one more thing," I said, taking my phone out of my pocket and showing the recording of my mother's call, the messages, the screenshots of the threats. "The lawyer already has all of this." He went pale. "You're exaggerating. It's just a house." "It's not just a house. It's my life. It's everything I conquered with sweat, tears, and an immense desire to never again depend on people like you." He tried to argue, but my mother appeared at the door. She still had that look of disdain, as if I were a stain on her family's perfection. But something changed when she realized I was serious, very serious, when she saw that I was no longer the quiet boy, but a man who knew how to defend himself. "Are you really willing to turn your back on your own mother?" "I don't have a mother. The woman who raised me is doing very well in the house I gave her. You just gave birth to me, and even that, and maybe it was against your will." She was speechless. For the first time in my entire life, I saw my biological mother without words, and it was in that silence that I said goodbye. Not with tears, with relief. I went home that day with a light heart. I knew it wouldn't be the end of the war, but I had taken the first real confrontational stance. I was no longer running away, and they realized that. But as I predicted, they didn't back down, and their next attack would be dirtier than I could imagine. I should have predicted that they wouldn't accept a no. People like them don't back down. They just resort to the next lowest form of manipulation. And that's exactly what they did. Less than a week after my visit, my phone rang again. It was a social worker. At first, I thought it was some bureaucracy related to my business, maybe some inspection process, but the call shocked me. "Sir, I received an anonymous report saying that the lady who lives with you, your adoptive mother, is being kept in abusive conditions, that she's being prevented from leaving the house, that she's being financially exploited." Right then, my blood ran cold. Not because of the content of the report, because it was obviously false, but because I knew exactly where it had come from. "I can guarantee that this is absurd," I said, swallowing my anger. "My mother is free, independent, and her money is safe. She has a card, a bank account, and more freedom than many people out there. But if you want, you can come here and talk to her personally." And that's what they did. 2 days later, they knocked on my door. A social worker and a representative from the elderly council. They asked questions, inspected everything, talked to my mother, and when she understood what was happening, her eyes filled with tears of indignation. "They're trying to destroy you again, my son," she said, hugging me tight. "But now you're not alone. They won't succeed." When the agents left and saw that everything was perfectly in order, I asked them to register in an official report that the complaint was unfounded. But I wasn't going to stop there. I called my lawyer, and this time I took the word lawsuit seriously. Enough veiled threats. They had crossed a line that should never have been crossed. Meanwhile, rumors started appearing on the city's social media. My parents, of course, were spreading stories that I had bewitched that policewoman, that she adopted me out of interest, and that now I used her money to buy houses and show off. As if I hadn't spent years selling candy on street corners to pay for prep courses, as if I hadn't made every damn delivery, worked as a waiter, alternated between shifts, sleepless nights, and days studying until I fell asleep. I could have ignored it, let it go, but something in me burned for justice. So I contacted a local journalist, a college friend, and told him my whole story, from abandonment to adoption to struggle to victory. He was shocked. I asked him not to mention names, just tell the story of a boy rejected by his family who rebuilt his own life with the help of a woman who loved him without any obligation. The article came out 2 days later with the headline, "The Boy Who Was Thrown Away and Built an Empire with Love and Resilience." That was the trigger. My phone exploded with messages. People I had never seen sent me support. People commented, "I knew you at school. They really treated you like trash." Others said, "This woman is a hero, and you're an example." And of course, my parents saw it too, and they couldn't stand it. My mother called me again, crying, but not from regret, from anger. "How could you expose our family like this?" I didn't expose anyone. I just told the truth. The shame isn't mine. And I hung up. That day was the first I slept with my soul at peace. But their game wasn't over yet, and the next move would be even dirtier. I thought that after the article they would back down. I thought that maybe, faced with public opinion, they would be ashamed to continue digging their own grave. But I underestimated the type of people who feed on poison. When they lost the narrative, they also lost any mask that remained. And what they did next showed me that they no longer just wanted the house, they wanted to destroy me. It started with a court summons, a lawsuit filed against me. Reason? Improper appropriation of family inheritance. Yes, you read that right, too. My biological parents claimed that the house I bought, with my own work, in my name, with the deed registered and paid off, had been bought with money that, according to them, came from a supposed inheritance from my biological father. That same father who died without leaving even an old watch, and whom my mother cheated on and detested. They were claiming that I had appropriated something that belonged to the family clan, as if I had ever been part of a clan. And to complete the delusion, they attached distorted conversations, truncated messages, and even a witness to the lawsuit. The gossipy neighbor who swore he heard my adoptive mother say that the house had been a gift from a relative. I laughed. Really? Because it was so absurd it bordered on comical. But my lawyer didn't find it funny. He explained to me that even though it was a case without legal basis, the lawsuit could hinder me, block transactions, damage my name in the market, create friction with clients. And more, they were trying to use justice as a weapon of revenge. That's when I understood. This wasn't just about a house. It was personal. They couldn't stand seeing me win. They couldn't stand the fact that, despite everything they did, I had succeeded, that the plan to erase me had failed, and that the boy they kicked to the street had become someone who could tell his own story and be heard. But I wasn't going to back down. I started preparing. I organized all the documents, all the receipts, contracts, construction photos, bank transfers. I asked my adoptive mother to give a written statement, and she did it with tears in her eyes. She reported everything, from the day she found me at the shelter to the moment she signed my adoption, including the nights she took me to the hospital with anxiety attacks because of the trauma from rejection. And while we were preparing to respond legally, something unexpected happened. I received a message from my brother's wife, or rather, from his fiancée. A huge message. She said she was reconsidering the marriage, that she never knew the complete story, that she had believed the family's versions because, in her words, no one would invent something so horrible against their own son. But after she read the article and saw the screenshots that leaked in the comments, She started putting the pieces together. She told me that my brother was aggressive, controlling, that he lived with fits of rage, and that now, with the wedding approaching, he was becoming someone she barely recognized. And then she dropped the bomb. "I just wanted to apologize to you and thank you. If it weren't for your story, maybe I would be about to make the worst mistake of my life." I responded respectfully, wishing her strength, making it clear that I held no grudge against her. The fault wasn't hers. It was from those who always thought they could manipulate everything and everyone without consequences. And there I realized something. The most powerful revenge wasn't destroying. It was living so well that their existence seemed insignificant. But the story still wasn't over. They still had one more blow saved up, and it would be the dirtiest of all. I thought I had already seen everything coming from them, but the final blow was so dirty, so low, that for a moment I felt like that 14-year-old boy again, standing on the sidewalk with a torn backpack, trying to understand how someone can be so cruel to their own blood. The lawsuit hearing was approaching. My lawyer was confident. We had all the necessary documents, irrefutable proof, and the judge had already requested an audit of the accounts and properties involved. Everything pointed to them being officially unmasked, with a stamp and everything. And that's when they decided to play dirty one last time. On the eve of the hearing, my adoptive mother had an accident, a hit and run, at her front door, in broad daylight. And the driver? An acquaintance of the biological family, a guy who used to frequent my mother's parties when I still lived with them. He claimed that she ran in front of the car suddenly, but witnesses said otherwise. They said he saw her crossing, accelerated, and only braked after hitting her. My mother broke her leg, had scrapes, but thank God wasn't in mortal danger. Even so, the psychological impact was devastating. She cried, saying it was her fault, that they were trying to hurt her because they could no longer reach me. And that destroyed me. I stayed by her hospital bed for hours, looking at the woman who saved me from the gutter, now lying there, hurt because of me, or rather, because of them. And I swore right there that this was going to have an end, a real end. The next day, I went to the hearing with my soul on fire. I entered the room with a calm face, but inside, every cell in my body wanted to scream. My parents were there. My brother, too, in formal clothes, pretending to be victims of an ungrateful son. The same performance as always. But this time, it wasn't going to work. My lawyer started presenting the documents, bank reports, testimonies. The judge seemed attentive, professional, but her expression changed with each piece of evidence until it was my turn to speak, and I spoke. For 30 minutes, I told everything, from the ignored childhood to the suitcases on the sidewalk, from the shelters to the nights on the street to the reunion with life thanks to the woman they were trying to destroy now. When I finished, no one was breathing. My parents were pale. My brother lowered his eyes. The judge then asked for silence and said a phrase that still echoes in my mind. "This court does not exist to validate emotional blackmail, nor to reward parents who abandon their children. Case dismissed with prejudice to the plaintiffs. And furthermore, given the evidence presented, I recommend to the prosecutor's office the opening of an investigation for false accusation, false testimony, and attempted fraud. I won. But more than that, they lost. Lost in front of everyone. Lost control. Lost the narrative. Lost their moral standing, if they ever had any. And it still wasn't over. I filed a lawsuit for moral damages. I demanded a protective measure for my adoptive mother. I filed a report against the hit-and-run driver, and I initiated judicial freezing of my brother's assets, since he was using his fiance's company name, who had now canceled the wedding, to launder money from illegal online gambling. Yes, I went all the way, because they deserved every second of consequence. I went home that night and found my adoptive mother waiting for me with a tired but genuine smile. She hugged me and said, "Now you're free, my son." And for the first time, I felt it was true. But there was something that still needed to be done, something I owed to my inner child. And it would be the final piece of this story. The lawsuit was over. Justice was done. But I still felt empty. Something inside me remained restless. as if the wound had been closed, but still pulsed from everything that wasn't said, from everything I had to swallow over the years. I didn't just want justice on paper. I wanted them to hear me. I wanted them to look me in the eyes and see, really see, who they had lost. That's when I decided to organize a meeting. Not to rebuild bonds, that would never be possible again, but to end the story my way. I sent a direct message to the family group, that same group they removed me from when I was expelled, and wrote, "You have 15 minutes of my time, tomorrow, at noon. If you want to hear what you're afraid to face, show up." The next day, in the event hall of my adoptive mother's house, the house I bought for her with pride, I prepared 2 chairs and a recorder, one for me, another for whoever had the courage to come. I didn't expect them to come, but they came. My mother, my stepfather, and my brother, with his usual cowardly look, now without a fiancé, without money, and according to what I heard, about to be evicted. They sat as if they were victims. They murmured, "We're here to talk," but I didn't let them start with their narrative. I took the recorder's microphone, pressed rec, and spoke. I want this conversation to be recorded, not for justice, nor for social media, but for myself, to never forget who I was, who you tried to erase, and who I became despite you. My mother tried to interrupt, saying she was sick, that everyone makes mistakes. But I stopped her with a gesture. Mistakes? A mistake is forgetting a birthday. A mistake is yelling in the middle of a fight. What you did was abandonment. It was premeditated cruelty. You threw a child out on the street. A child, to satisfy the whims of a spoiled boy. My stepfather snorted, saying I was always ungrateful, that they had their problems. And do you think I didn't have mine? I slept on cold floors. I was kicked from shelter to shelter. I grew up learning to swallow pain, while you were feeding the ego of a kid who never had to work, who today lives trying to extort the only person who managed to win alone. You didn't raise a son. You raised a parasite. My brother remained silent. For the first time, perhaps, understanding that his image was no longer protected by the cloak of my mother's lies. The mask had fallen. I don't hate you, I continued, facing each of them, because hating would still require that you meant something to me. And today, you don't. What moves me now is gratitude. Gratitude for having expelled me. Because without that, I would never have met my real mother. I would never have found my strength. And I would never have learned that family isn't blood. Family is who lifts you up when everyone turns their backs. I stood up, pressed stop on the recorder, and finished. Now yes, I'm free. They said nothing. They couldn't. And I left, without looking back. Months later, I received a notification that my biological mother had applied for social assistance. The damages lawsuit continued, and their lives crumbled. But I felt no pleasure in that. I felt peace, because now I knew who I was. I knew what I had conquered, and above all, I knew that my story was one of victory, not revenge. Today, I give lectures on overcoming adversity. My company grew, and my adoptive mother, my real mother, lives with me, full of health, surrounded by friends who treat her like the queen she is. And every time I look in the mirror, I see not only the reflection of someone who won, but the calm gaze of someone who went to hell and came back building bridges.